There exists a prison that has no iron bars, no stone walls. Its chains are invisible, woven not by the state or by brute force, but by the prisoner's own hand. This prison does not rise in dark or remote places, but in the heart of our homes, in the familiarity of our belongings, in the comfort of our possessions. It is the prison of perpetual desire, where each object acquired does not satisfy, but only intensifies the hunger. And the mechanism of this ancestral trap has a name: the Diderot Effect, the Broken Window Fallacy, and the silent consumerism that transforms abundance into spiritual scarcity. Denis Diderot, the great French Enlightenment philosopher, discovered this truth in the cruelest way. In 1765, he received a magnificent gift, a scarlet silk robe, luxurious and resplendent. It was the kind of object any man of letters would desire, a symbol of refinement and intellectual success. Diderot wore the robe with joy, feeling for the first time worthy of his own intellect. But then, something sinister began to happen. He looked around his modest study, and everything that had previously seemed adequate now appeared sordid and unworthy. His old writing desk, which had served faithfully for decades, now seemed an affront to the magnificent robe. His common wood bookshelves, his simple paintings, his worn chair, everything transformed into testimonies of an intolerable inadequacy. And so, the spiral began. Diderot replaced the desk with one of carved mahogany. Then came the velvet curtains, the new upholstered armchair, the Persian rugs, the bronze sculptures. Each new acquisition demanded another, as if each object whispered in his ear, "You don't deserve to be surrounded by things inferior to me." When the transformation was finally complete, Diderot found himself sitting in a study he didn't recognize, surrounded by objects he didn't need, suffocated by a debt he hadn't anticipated. He had traded the peace of sufficiency for the tyranny of appearance, and in a moment of bitter lucidity, he wrote an essay titled "Regrets on Parting with My Old Dressing Gown," where he confessed, "I was absolute master of my old robe. I have become a slave to the new one." This is not merely the story of a vain philosopher. It is the anatomy of a psychological trap that imprisons millions. The Diderot Effect reveals a fundamental truth about human nature. We do not desire isolated objects, but harmonious sets. Our aesthetic sense, our desire for coherence, our need for identity, all conspire to transform a single purchase into a cascade of acquisitions. We buy a new sofa, and suddenly the old curtains seem out of place. We acquire a luxury car, and our house seems too humble to shelter it. We wear designer clothes, and our previous accessories become a source of shame. Each elevation of standard in one area of life demands corresponding elevations in all others, like dominoes falling in endless cascade. But there is a second trap, older and more insidious, intertwined with the Diderot Effect. It is the Broken Window Fallacy, formulated by French economist Frédéric Bastiat in 1850. Bastiat tells us about a boy who breaks a bakery window. The spectators, trying to console the baker, argue that the misfortune is not so terrible. After all, the glazier will have work. The glazier will spend his payment on other businesses, and thus the economy will be stimulated. The broken window, they suggest, is actually a blessing in disguise. But Bastiat reveals the fatal error in this reasoning. They see only what is visible, the money flowing to the glazier, but they don't see the invisible, what the baker would have done with that money if he weren't forced to repair the window. Perhaps he would buy a book, or invest in his business, or save for the future. The broken window doesn't create wealth, it merely redistributes it, destroying choice and opportunity in the process. Now, observe how these two ideas intertwine in a macabre dance. The Diderot Effect makes us break our own metaphorical windows. We ourselves declare inadequate the objects that serve us perfectly, creating artificial needs where contentment once existed. And then we fall into the trap of the broken window fallacy, rationalizing our compulsive consumption as if it were investment or necessary stimulus. "I need a new wardrobe," we say, "because this will make me look more professional, which will lead to promotions and opportunities." But we don't see the invisible cost, the overtime hours worked to pay for clothes we didn't need, the financial stress that erodes our peace of mind, the real investment opportunities we sacrificed on the altar of appearance. Imagine now a character, a collector who lives in a city of stone and fog, where time seems suspended between centuries. This collector is not rich, but neither is he poor. He works as a scribe, copying manuscripts by candlelight, earning enough for a simple and dignified life. His house is modest but welcoming, furnished with inherited objects and practical utensils. He possesses few books, but reads them repeatedly. His clothes are simple, but clean and well-maintained. He knows the tranquility of sufficiency, that rare state of mind where desire sleeps and gratitude awakens. One day, walking through the market, the collector sees in a window an object of extraordinary beauty, a gold pocket watch with gears visible through transparent crystal, marking not only the hours, but also the phases of the moon and the positions of the planets. It is a masterpiece of engineering and art, an object that whispers promises of sophistication and refinement. The collector, normally prudent, feels an overwhelming desire. He rationalizes. A man of knowledge, a scribe who works with precision, surely deserves such a precise instrument. And so, after weeks of tormented deliberation, he spends his savings and acquires the watch. At first, there is ecstasy. The collector admires the watch constantly, feeling the pleasant weight in his pocket, hearing the mechanical tick-tock that marks his social ascent. But then, slowly, insidiously, discord begins. He looks at his simple clothes and realizes that such a magnificent watch deserves a vest of superior quality. So he buys an embroidered velvet vest, but now the vest demands pants of better cut. The pants demand fine leather boots. The boots demand a cane with a silver handle. Each acquisition seems logical, even necessary, to maintain the coherence of his presentation. Soon, the cascade reaches his home. The watch and fine clothes seem incongruous with his modest furniture. He begins to replace his inherited furniture with new and elegant pieces. The rustic kitchen table is exchanged for one of polished wood. The simple chairs give way to upholstered seats. The faded curtains are replaced by imported fabrics. Each change seems inevitable, as if the universe itself demanded aesthetic harmony. The collector doesn't realize that he has become a slave to a standard he himself established, that each step on the ladder of sophistication only reveals infinite steps above him. But there is a hidden cost, invisible as air, but heavy as lead. To finance these acquisitions, the collector accepts additional work, copying manuscripts late into the night, sacrificing sleep and health. He postpones the repair of the leaking roof, telling himself he'll do it next month. He reduces his diet, eating less to spend more on appearances. He abandons old friends whose simple homes now seem embarrassing to him. He stops buying the books he loved so much because every coin must be directed to maintaining the standard he established. The watch that promised to elevate him has become an anchor dragging him down. And here is the cruel irony. The collector is no longer happier. In fact, he is perpetually anxious, always conscious of the next object he needs to acquire, always comparing his possessions with those of others, always feeling that he is falling behind in a race that has no finish line. The simplicity that once brought peace has been replaced by complexity that brings only restlessness. He broke his own metaphorical windows and now finds himself in an endless race to repair them, without ever questioning why he broke them in the first place. The years pass like leaves dragged by the wind. The collector ages prematurely, bent not by age, but by the weight of his possessions. His hair whitens, not with the wisdom of years, but with the stress of maintaining appearances. His house, now filled with expensive objects, feels strangely empty. A soulless museum where he is simultaneously curator and prisoner. He looks at the gold watch, still marking time with mechanical precision, and realizes with horror that he has become exactly like the watch. An elaborate machine executing predetermined movements, with no purpose beyond its own function. On a particularly cold winter night, the roof he postponed repairing finally gives way. Water invades his carefully decorated house, staining the Persian rugs, warping the mahogany furniture, ruining the velvet curtains. The collector, standing in the middle of the disaster, has a bitter epiphany. He sacrificed the essential for the ornamental. He traded security for appearance, substance for surface. And now, surrounded by the ruins of his vanity, he finally understands the truth that was always before him. That the most secure prison is the one we build for ourselves, brick by brick, purchase by purchase, desire by desire. This fable is not a relic of the past, but a mirror of the present. We live in an era where the Diderot Effect operates on an industrial scale, where every advertisement, every influencer, every virtual storefront is designed to awaken the sense of inadequacy. We buy new smartphones not because the old ones stopped working, but because they seem obsolete. We renovate perfectly habitable houses because decorating magazines convince us that our style is outdated. We trade functional cars for newer models because our neighbors did. And every time we give in to this impulse, we break our own windows and initiate the cascade of compensatory spending. Modern industry doesn't just sell products, it sells identities. They don't just offer objects, they offer the promise of transformation. Buy this, and you'll be more confident, more attractive, more successful, happier. But this promise is an ancient lie disguised in modern packaging. Happiness doesn't reside in acquisition, but in liberation from the desire for acquisition. Contentment doesn't come from possessing more, but from needing less. True wealth isn't measured by what we have, but by what we can do without. Consider the paradox of unlimited choice. In theory, more options should make us happier, allowing us to find exactly what we want. But research reveals the opposite. The more options we have, the more anxious we become. The more dissatisfied with our choices, the more prone to regret. This is because each unchosen option represents a potential loss, an untraveled path. The Diderot Effect exploits this psychological vulnerability. Each new object we acquire opens our eyes to hundreds of other objects we need to maintain coherence, creating perpetual anxiety of inadequacy. And there is yet another sinister element in this web: consumption as identity. In traditional societies, identity came from stable social roles. You were a farmer, a craftsman, a member of a certain family or community. But in liquid modernity, where careers change, families fragment, and communities dissolve, we seek identity through consumption. We become what we buy. I'm a craft coffee aficionado, so I need the $2,000 espresso machine, the imported beans, the Japanese porcelain cups. I'm a fitness enthusiast, so I need the brand name gym clothes, the latest smartwatch, the premium supplements. Each consumer identity comes with its own set of mandatory objects, its own Diderot cascade. But here is the truth that markets don't want you to know. Authentic identity cannot be bought. It is cultivated through actions, relationships, lived values, not displayed ones. A writer doesn't become a writer by buying the most expensive pen, but by writing daily with whatever instrument is available. A musician doesn't become a musician by possessing the most sophisticated equipment, but by practicing tirelessly with what they have. A sage doesn't become a sage by accumulating expensive books, but by applying knowledge to life. The Diderot Effect thrives on the confusion between being and appearing, between essence and appearance. And as for the Broken Window Fallacy, it operates not just in economics, but in our personal lives. How many times do we rationalize unnecessary spending as investments in ourselves? How many times do we justify impulsive purchases as deserved after periods of hard work? How many times do we see only the immediate benefit, the momentary satisfaction, but ignore the invisible cost, the financial security sacrificed, the future freedom mortgaged, the opportunities not perceived, because our resources were wasted on windows we ourselves broke? The true tragedy is not the poverty of possessions, but the poverty of spirit that makes us slaves to possessions. There is a profound difference between chosen simplicity and imposed deprivation. Deprivation is involuntary suffering, the absence of choice. But voluntary simplicity is conscious liberation, the choice to value experience over objects, relationships over possessions, being over having. It is the understanding that each object we possess not only occupies physical space, but also mental space. Each possession requires maintenance, protection, worry. Minimalism is not about having less through masochistic asceticism, but about having less to live more. Think of the truly rich, not in monetary terms, but in existential terms. They are not those who possess mansions filled with objects, but those who possess time to contemplate the sunset. They are not those whose closets overflow with clothes, but those who feel comfortable in their own skin. They are not those with garages full of vehicles, but those with minds free of financial anxiety. Real wealth is freedom. Freedom to choose how to spend your time. Freedom to say no to jobs that corrode your soul. freedom to sleep peacefully without worries of debts, freedom to follow curiosities and passions without the weight of oppressive financial obligations. The collector of our fable learned this lesson too late, in the midst of the literal ruins of his vanity. But you don't have to wait for the roof to collapse. You can choose now to question each desire before transforming it into action. Ask yourself, will this object truly improve my life, or just initiate a new cascade of artificial needs? Does this purchase represent genuine necessity, or just capitulation to the Diderot Effect? Am I seeing clearly both the visible and the invisible, both what I gain and what I lose? Ancient wisdom knew what modernity forgot, that the path to happiness is not addition, but subtraction. It is not accumulation, but careful curation. It is not following every desire, but cultivating the discernment to distinguish between genuine desire and external manipulation. The Stoics of ancient Rome practiced what they called praemeditatio malorum, the anticipatory visualization of losses. They imagined themselves losing their possessions to better appreciate what they had, and to prepare psychologically for impermanence. Epicurus, often misinterpreted as a hedonist, actually preached moderation and distinguished between necessary and unnecessary pleasures, between natural and empty desires. There is an ancient practice that can serve as an antidote to the Diderot effect: deliberate gratitude. Before acquiring something new, force yourself to deeply contemplate what you already possess. That old table, it has witnessed how many family meals, how many important conversations, how many moments of real life. That worn sofa? How many books have you read sitting on it? How many nights of rest has it provided? When we see our objects not as interchangeable commodities, but as silent companions of our journey, it becomes much more difficult to discard them on aesthetic whim. And there is also the practice of deliberate waiting. When you feel the impulse to buy something significant, impose a waiting period, 30 days, 90 days, whatever period allows the fire of immediate desire to cool. Frequently, you will discover that after this period, the desire simply evaporated. It was a whim, not a necessity. This practice exposes the ephemeral nature of many of our consumption desires, revealing them as externally manipulated impulses, not authentic aspirations. But perhaps the most powerful practice is this: visualize the real cost of each purchase, not in terms of money, but in terms of life. How much time did you have to work to earn that money? How many hours of your unique and irrecoverable existence were exchanged for that object? When you see a $1,000 item not as just $1,000, but as 50 hours of my life, the decision becomes crystal clear. Do you really want to trade 50 hours of your finite life for this object? Sometimes the answer is yes, and that's perfectly legitimate. But frequently, shamefully frequently, the answer is no. The collector in our fable eventually had to sell many of his precious objects to repair the roof and rebuild his life. And in this process of undoing his own work, he discovered something surprising. Each object sold brought not pain, but relief. Each possession dispensed with created not emptiness, but space. Physical space in his house, yes, but more importantly, mental space, spiritual space. He rediscovered the pleasure of a simple life, where needs are few and easily satisfied, where gratitude flourishes naturally, because there is no constant comparison with unattainable standards. This is true freedom, not the ability to buy anything, but liberation from the need to buy everything. Not the accumulation of possessions, but the careful curation of a few genuinely valued objects. Not the relentless pursuit of the next upgrade, but deep contentment with enough. Enough is not deprivation, it is wisdom. It is recognizing that there is a point beyond which more doesn't add value, only complexity. That there is a threshold beyond which each additional acquisition subtracts more than it adds, stealing time, attention, peace of mind. So, the next time you feel the irresistible impulse to buy something because it seems perfect for you, pause, breathe, recognize the Diderot effect trying to sink its claws. Ask yourself, will this object truly improve my life, or just initiate a cascade of dissatisfaction with everything else I own? Am I seeing clearly both the benefit and the hidden cost? Am I choosing freely or being manipulated by forces that profit from my perpetual dissatisfaction? Bastiat's broken window and Diderot's robe are the same lesson told from different angles. That destruction is not creation, that manufactured dissatisfaction is not genuine aspiration, that the cascade of compensatory consumption doesn't lead to harmony, but to chaos. We are all, in a way, that collector, living in houses whose roofs we neglect while we polish the silver. We are all tempted to break our own windows, and then proudly announce that we're stimulating the economy by repairing them. But there is a different path, a path that requires courage in a culture that equates consumption with identity. It is the path of conscious sufficiency, of deliberate gratitude, of gentle but firm refusal to participate in the arms race of consumption. It is the path that recognizes that you are not your possessions, that your dignity doesn't depend on the market value of your wardrobe, that your identity transcends any object you can buy or display. This path is not easy because we swim against powerful currents, but it is possible, and those who walk it discover something precious, that the prison we spoke of at the beginning, the one without bars or walls, has a door that was never locked. It was always open. We were simply so busy polishing our chains that we never thought to check. The choice, as always, is yours. You can continue being a slave to the new robe, breaking infinite windows and wondering why there's never enough money to fix the roof. Or you can embrace the radical freedom of sufficiency, discovering that less can be exponentially more. The fable has been told. The moral is clear. Now, the next chapter of the story belongs to you. If these words resonated with something deep within you, if you recognize the shadows of your own life in this fable, then perhaps it's time to seek more hidden truths about the psychology of money and the biases that govern our decisions. Subscribe to the Financial Fables, where each episode unearths another layer of forgotten wisdom, revealing not the how of financial success, but the why of financial failure, and especially the whys that imprison us in patterns of behavior we recognize as destructive but seem unable to break. Because in the end, the true fable is not in Diderot's past or in Bastiat's parables. The true fable is happening now, in the quietness of your own life, where each consumption choice is a verse in a narrative you're writing without realizing it. The question is not whether your story will have a happy ending, but whether you will awaken in time to become the conscious author of your own destiny, instead of remaining the unconscious character in a story written by markets that profit from your perpetual dissatisfaction.